Welcome everyone once again to another episode of Coffee and Bolters. Welcome to the age of Dimitri and Titus. So it turns out that this week, Games Workshop, among all the new things they've announced, well, they've slipped in an incredible video on the level of Secret Level, where Dimitri and Titus shows up, well, now commanding the second company of the Ultramarines. So naturally, we wanted to bring it to you and to find out what his story is, what his background is, how he got to where he is today. And well, we genuinely believe that he is going to be a truly predominant character in all of the Games Workshop lore from now on, especially in relation to the Ultramarines. And he's going to be a very, very, very central character. We're convinced of it. Later, at the end of the video, we'll make a few suppositions and speculate on what could happen with Dimitri and Titus. And we should also warn you that this video contains spoilers. If you haven't played Space Marine 1 or Space Marine 2, or if you haven't yet had the chance to see the Secret Level episode, well, you've got just a bit of catching up to do. So, let's get to it. Let's start with a brief introduction. Dimitri and Titus, known as the Guardian of Ultramar, is a former captain of the Ultramarines, specifically of the Second Company. By a twist of fate, his rank was reduced to lieutenant until just a few days ago, practically. And now he is once again the captain of the Second Company of the Ultramarines. He has fought for the Imperium of Man for more than 200 Terran years. His feats have earned him a reputation as one of the greatest heroes of Ultramar. Despite his relative youth by Astartes standards, he was already a decorated veteran of several major campaigns waged across the galaxy by his chapter. One of Titus's last known campaigns before his disappearance took place on the Forge World of Graia, where he helped lead a successful defense against an assault from an Orc Wah, led by the warlord Grimskull. This was followed by a subsequent Chaos invasion commanded by the Chaos sorcerer Nemeroth and his warband, the Chosen of Nemeroth, of the heretic Astartes. Showing an unnatural affinity for resisting attacks made using powers of the warp, and pay attention to this, by the forces of Chaos during the liberation of Graia, Titus was taken into custody under suspicion of heresy by the Inquisition after this campaign. Subsequently, he disappeared from all official Imperial records for almost a standard century. By the will of the Emperor, the wayward Titus was miraculously returned to the Ultramarines in the Era Indomitus and acquitted of all his charges. He proceeded to cross the Rubicon Primaris and was transformed into a Primaris Space Marine. Reassigned to the Second Company, he was unfortunately reduced to the rank of lieutenant, so as not to bring discord to the existing hierarchies within the Ultramarines. Titus did not mind the reduction in status. He was simply grateful to be considered worthy of serving the chapter once more. Later, he believed he had redeemed himself, both in the eyes of his chapter and in his own, with the victory he helped achieve for the Ultramarines and Imperial forces in the Residia campaign during the Fourth Tyrannic War. After a mission with his mentor Metorus to the world of, this one is hard to pronounce, Sogh, which many believed would seal his fate with death. If you haven't seen the Secret Level episode, please go run, you fools. Titus emerged victorious and was elevated to the rank of captain, receiving command of the Ultramarines' Second Company for a second time, after the fall of his predecessor, Sevastus Acheran, who had replaced Titus's successor, Cato Sicarius. Destiny seemed to play in his favor, calling upon the hero when the galaxy needed him most. This annoyed me at the time, or it did annoy me at the time. Why? Because I had Sevastus Acheran, both in Gravis and in MK10 armor, so... But hey, I'll trade him for Titus, eh? Anyway, we've said that he was given back command of the Ultramarines' Second Company, but not only that, Titus was named Master of the Watch, the supreme commander in charge of protecting the imposing fortress monastery of the Ultramarines on Macragge, a bastion that symbolizes the strength and honor of the entire chapter. But the Primarch Robute Gilliman had bigger plans for him. He had ordered the Ultramarines to restore the realm of Ultramar to its pre-heresy splendor, recovering the 500 worlds under its banner. To fulfill this almost impossible mission, Titus was invested with the title of Guardian of Ultramar, an honor that carried with it a colossal responsibility and a weight that few could bear. To face such a challenge, he was allowed to forge an elite team composed of human mortals and personally chosen Astartes. Trusted warriors who would go down in history as the Guardians of Ultramar, custodians of the expansion and defense of the ultramarine domain and a symbol of Titus's indomitable power. But who was Titus? Let's start with his origins. We're convinced that from now on, Games Workshop is going to expand this character, but by a lot. We'll surely learn much more about his past from this point forward, but this is what we know for now. The saga of Dimitri and Titus began approximately 175 standard years before the end of the 41st millennium, according to the old imperial calendar in the realm of Ultramar, home of the Ultramarines chapter. Recognized throughout the Imperium as unwavering guardians and masters of combat, the Ultramarines forged in Titus a spirit worthy of his heritage. From his youth, Titus was recruited and stood out among his peers. Although his temperament sometimes pushed him to the limit, he overcame countless adversaries and endured physical and psychological wounds, rising quickly through the ranks of the Second Company. Following the Codex Astartes, the sacred guide written by Robute Gilliman, he understood that more than the letters, it was the spirit of the Codex that determined the true worth of an Astartes. In the early days of his career, Titus forged a close friendship with the veteran Sergeant Sidonius. During a mission, his squad faced a Chaos Sorcerer, a Psyche corrupted by the ruinous powers. His entire squad was annihilated by attacks from the Warp. But Titus, gravely wounded, survived the direct energy of the Immaterium and he alone took down the Sorcerer. Surprising even the chapter's apothecaries, Titus made a full recovery. Many suspected his resistance was the work of Chaos Corruption, but not even he could explain how he had survived such deadly powers. We are now about 10 years before the events of Space Marine 1 on the planet Beta Arcturus. Sometime later, the Ultramarines' Second Company was deployed to Beta Arcturus to repel the invasion of the Eldar Aspect Warriors of Bieltan. Under the leadership of the Second Company's captain, Trajan, Titus led the command squad against the Xenos General's elite guard, taking down 3 of the lethal combatants and breaking through the impenetrable armor of the Eldar. The enemies were defeated, but they captured Leandros, one of Titus's battle brothers. Trajan, tricked by an Eldari ambush, was cruelly struck down, but Titus led the counterattack, recovering his body and taking command of the force that definitively expelled the invaders. His brief tenure as provisional captain soon became permanent, following Trajan's return to Macragge to be buried with honors in the fortress of Hera. Over the years, Titus led the Second Company to countless victories against mutants, Xenos, and heretics, earning the admiration of the chapter's high command, including the chapter master, Marneus Calgar. However, despite his successes, Titus still felt the weight of assuming the legacy of his fallen mentor Trajan. At the end of the 41st millennium, after more than 150 years of service with Leandros and Sidonius by his side, the Second Company continued its implacable advance against all the threats the galaxy threw at them. We'd like to remind you, if you're enjoying the video, please like, comment, and if you can, share. We also want to remind you that we have the guide on how to paint Lieutenant Titus on our Patreon, so if you're eager to paint him, it's there. Also, the new book with the Marine characters has just been released, and he's included, so you have no excuse. And of course, we will bring you the Guardians of Ultramar, the captain of the Second Company, Dimitri and Titus. The point we're at now is the beginning of Space Marine 1, the liberation of Graia. 10 standard years after assuming command of the Second Company, Captain Titus led a force of Ultramarines to the forge world of Graia, besieged by 1,000,000 orcs from Grimskull's Whack. The Warlord sought to appropriate advanced Imperial weapons, including a Warlord-class battle titan, and the threat loomed over the entire planet. But the Orc invasion was only the prelude to a darker plan, woven by the Chaos Sorcerer, Nemeroth, Warlord of the Chosen of Nemeroth. His objective, to seize an experimental energy source that would allow him to ascend to Demon Prince. Accompanied by Sergeant Sidonus and battle brother Leandros, Titus joined the 203rd Cadian Shock Regiment of the Astra Militarum, and its only surviving officer, Lieutenant Mira, to take down Grimskull and stop the Wag. However, betrayal awaited. Inquisitor Drogon, whom the Astartes trusted to recover Graia, was actually an undead pawn of Nemeroth. Armed with a weapon called the Psyker Scourge, powered by the energy source, he opened a portal to the warp, allowing Chaos and its hordes of demons to descend upon Graia. Even so, Titus once again showed his immunity to the sorcerer's psychic power, arousing the suspicions of the puritanical Leandros about the possible corruption of his commander. After Sidonus' death at the hands of Nemeroth, Titus pursued the sorcerer to his final moments, struck down the malevolent enemy, and sent his dark soul back to the warp for the punishment of his dark gods. We continue with Titus' captivity. Despite his heroism, Captain Titus was arrested by Inquisitor Thrax and his retinue of Black Templars on charges of heresy. This followed Leandros' warnings about Titus' unusual resistance to the powers of the Immaterium and his deviations from the Codex Astartes, the sacred guide of the Ultramarines. After being taken for interrogation, Titus vanished from the chapter's annals for a time. Cato Sicarius then took command of the Second Company, feeling he had been overlooked after the First Tyrannic War. Inquisitor Thrax, filled with resentment toward the Astartes, believing these superhumans were a danger to humanity, as had been proven 10,000 years earlier, held Titus prisoner for over a standard century. He subjected him to physical and psychic torture, searching for the source of his supernatural resistance to the warp. Between interrogations, Titus remained in stasis, enduring torments that failed to reveal any sign of corruption. Meanwhile, Chapter Master Marneus Calgar made repeated petitions to the Holy Ordos of the Inquisition to retrieve his captain, but the labyrinths of inquisitorial power remained silent. For many Terran years, neither Inquisitor Thrax nor Demetrian Titus gave any sign of life to their chapter. And now we arrive at the events of Space Marine 2. After Titus had spent a standard century in captivity under the Inquisition, Inquisitor Thrax organized an operation against the corrupt Grey Slayers chapter, which was infested by the insidious designs of the Dark Gods. Leading a large contingent of Grey Knights, they began the purge of the heretic Astartes, never suspecting that corruption itself was lying in wait. In the midst of the conflict, Thrax was possessed by a demon and annihilated by his own Grey Knights. Following his death, forces from the Red Hunters chapter, and as a side note, this is a chapter whose founding is unknown, possibly the second founding, or perhaps it was created just after the Horus Heresy to hunt traitors. In any case, they have always been tied to the Inquisition, were sent to investigate and secure the Inquisitor's domains. At a remote watch station, a team discovered nearly 20 Marines in stasis cells, preserved from the passage of time. Among them was Titus, whose fate might have ended there, hidden from history, were it not for the intervention of the Red Hunters. Titus and other warriors from various chapters were transferred to the Watch Fortress to be evaluated. Free from the corruption of chaos and any disloyalty, he entered service as a Black Shield in the Death Watch, adopting the name Nullus and concealing his true identity. With a heart heavy with guilt and his honor stained, he stripped himself of all his chapter's insignia, taking on a self-imposed exile while he hunted Xenos with his new brothers in arms. If he could serve the Imperium and the Emperor as a warrior of the Death Watch, even if it was only to die in combat, he would do so without seeking personal glory. And so, under the name Nullus, he fought for years. While the Primarch Robute Guilliman was resurrected on Macrage, leading the Indomitus Crusade and facing the enemies of humanity in a galaxy torn apart by the Great Rift. During the Fourth Tyrannic War, when the Tyranids invaded the domains of Segmentum Pacificus, Nullus was deployed alongside his Death Watch squad. After a fierce confrontation on Kadaku, he was gravely wounded by a monstrous carnifex as his companions fell around him. Just as death was about to claim him, the Ultramarines arrived like a ray of hope, led by Varro Tigurius, the chief librarian, who recognized the spirit of Demetrian Titus in the warp. Back among his own, Titus underwent the Calgarian rites, the Rubicon Primaris, emerging stronger and transformed into a Primaris Marine. Though reassigned to the rank of lieutenant under the command of Sevastos Acheron, he accepted his fate with the same discipline he had shown during his interrogations by Thrax. The chapter, after verifying his purity, welcomed him back. And so the Black Shield was reborn as Lieutenant Demetrian Titus, ready to unleash the wrath of the Ultramarines against the enemies of the Imperium. We're approaching the end, or the beginning, depending on how you look at it, the mission on Sawich. Sometime later, Lieutenant Titus reunited with his old recruiter and friend, Veteran Sergeant Blesgard Metoros, to face a suicide mission on Sau, an Imperial world that had fallen to the cult of Tzeentch. Along with two other veterans, Icaron and Levantos, they formed an elite squad sent to destroy a Chaos relic. Titus carried a stasis sarcophagus and, across the hostile terrain, confronted cultists and the bestial Tsangors of Tzeentch, who fell before the might of the Ultramarines. Upon reaching the statue of a demonic Lord of Change, he released the astropath from the sarcophagus and attacked alongside his companions. But a mutant sorcerer froze time and killed the astropath, murdering Icaron and Levantos while gravely wounding Metoros. Facing Titus, who was immune to fear, the lieutenant turned the tables and split the sorcerer in two with his combat knife. With the sorcerer's death, the control over time was broken, and the squad's gunfire destroyed the statue, sending out a beam of light. It was detected by the Ultramarine ship in orbit, which launched its artillery to erase all remaining corruption. With the mission accomplished, the ship ordered Metoros and Titus to die with honor, but Titus dragged the wounded Metoros to safety, and securing his helmet, prepared to face more Chaos cultists who were approaching. That just gave me goosebumps. And now, hail Great Primarch, hail Emperor, hail to the Guardian of Ultramar, Demetrian Titus. Sometime later, following his and Metoros' unexpected survival on the Jaiog mission, and after the death of Sevastos Acheron, Titus was promoted by the chapter master, Marneus Calgar, to the rank of captain once more. He was offered command of the Ultramarines' second company and the position of Master of the Guard, defender of the fortress on Macragge. Subsequently, he was assigned to oversee the defense of Macragge and the entire realm of Ultramar, as well as to expand Ultramar to its original size of 500 worlds at the time of the Horus Heresy, just as Primarch Robute Gilliman had ordered. As such, Titus was also named Guardian of Ultramar and was allowed to choose a special command team composed of both mortals and space marines, known as the Guardians of Ultramar, to assist him in his duties. Alright, final thoughts. It's amazing how the success of a video game that came out a year and a half ago can change things. We know that Games Workshop doesn't do anything without a reason, but it's also true that a video game's success doesn't depend on Games Workshop, it depends on sales. And David and I, having played for many years, we know how this whole video game thing works and the impact sales have on a release and so on. It's true that Space Marine 2 was a massive hit, a blockbuster of a game, a really great one. So, alright, what do we have in Space Marine 2? Demetrian Titus shows up. And Demetrian Titus appears with a slightly older, more distinguished face, in reference to Space Marine 1, okay? He appears with a somewhat older face, like a seasoned and weathered individual. What happens? In Secret Lair, they present us with a Demetrian Titus who even resembles Henry Cavill. So, in our opinion, what actually happened is that Demetrian Titus's facial expression during Space Marine 2 was simply what it was at the time. However, with the game's truly massive and unexpected success, Games Workshop decided to take action very quickly to address the situation. And with Henry Cavill in the picture, well, let's say they rejuvenated and improved, in our opinion, Titus's face, turning him into the Titus he is now. This game is only a year old, so it seems very strange to us that Games Workshop didn't think about all this, you know? But at the same time, the success of Space Marine 2 is tied to the game's sales. If the game hadn't sold, we're convinced that none of this would have happened, okay? What's the end of the end? It starts by being the beginning, which is him now being the captain of the second company of the Ultramarines. Cato Sicarius has been promoted to leader of the Victrix. At Iran, they've taken him out. And this is, of course, just a personal opinion. And I think that both David and Gerard, in their own ways, kind of agree with me on this point. And that is that in a few years from now, I'd say perhaps in about 2 editions or so, Titus is going to be the chapter master of the Ultramarines. And Marnir Skalgar, I don't know what they're going to do with him. But they're taking Marnir Skalgar out of the picture. Because right now, Titus is the face of the Space Marines. He's the face of Games Workshop.